We're talking South Dakota State University football. Not a good week for the Jackrabbits. They go on the road in the Missouri Valley Conference opener, lose 45-10, David, at Illinois State. Why was this thing a disaster from pretty much the get-go?
Turnovers, basically. They just could not, SDSU could not get anything going offensively, and it wasn't helped by the turnovers, really. They had 3 first-quarter turnovers that led to 3 Illinois State touchdowns. It was 21-0 after the first quarter, and honestly, as sad as this is to say, it felt over then. Everything kept piling on and on and on, and I jokingly called it on Twitter. I called it the quarter from hell, because it was. They just could not get anything going. They had back-to-back fumbles that led to touchdowns, and just nothing seemed to get in a good rhythm offensively, and then consequently that puts pressure on the defense, and they gave up chunks of huge yardage, especially to their quarterback, Trey Roberson.
All right, one of those rotten, just terrible days. One of those days for the Jackrabbits. All the fumbles bouncing right to Illinois State's hands, and they had a running back named Marshawn Coprich. What was your impression of this kid? He had 170 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. That was Illinois State's 3 touchdowns to get to that 21-0 lead. He was a good elusive back. We talked to Coach Stig a little bit. They were blitzing on a lot of those running plays, so I don't know if it wasn't fitting the gaps correctly or if it was an over pursuit on their part, but there were other plays later in the game, one in particular where he got 62 yards on a 3rd and 1 that Stig called the most disappointing play of the entire game. They just could not, as Stig said, they could not fit the plays around him. The line did a great job for the Redbirds. The quarterback wasn't sacked. The running back got free in space. The Jacks just could not fit the play, and the second and third levels just could not contain Coprich.
Yeah, Jacks were just an arm's length away on trying to make those tackles all day. Illinois State ends up with 499 yards. Jackrabbits over 400 yards themselves. What were a couple of positives out of this, if there were any, for South Dakota State?
I guess if there's one positive, it's the continued development of Jake Winicky. He had SDSU's only touchdown. He had 7 catches for, I believe, more than 110 yards, and that touchdown continues to be sort of that big play, big threat receiver. A Jason Schneider clone, if you will, which will be good for the Jacks when Schneider graduates this spring. So knowing that they have him as a solid guy on the outside for the next couple of years is going to be a relief to some, but overall kind of a game that SDSU would like to forget. But at the same time, for your first game in Missouri Valley Conference play, it's a real eye-opener, and they're going to have to, as Stig said, get some confidence back.
All right, Zach Zenner goes for 144 yards on 27 carries.
But he was a quiet 144. Yeah, right. He got a couple of big 20-yard gains in the 3rd and 4th quarter when it was well out of reach, and Zenner wasn't terrible, but when they were down by so many points, they didn't really go to him until later in the game when it was sort of out of hand. So I guess as quiet 144 yards as you can imagine from Zach Zenner.
Just all kinds of strange things in this game that went against the Jackrabbits. An interception that should have been an interception in the first half by Melvin Tavares was called an incomplete pass. End of the first half, Illinois State throws 2 Hail Marys into the end zone. They catch them both get called back for offensive penalties, but that is just how strange this game was, especially in the first half.
Yeah, and when you think about it, they got those 2 Hail Marys, and the penalties had nothing to do with the Jacks secondary. There was a holding on the offensive line on the first one, and then on the second one, it was an ineligible man downfield because the offensive lineman went too far past the line of scrimmage. So the fact that they completed 2 Hail Marys in a row against the Jacks secondary and the penalties had nothing to do with the Jacks secondary was a bit disconcerting, if you will. It should have been 45-3 at the half.
All right, it was 38-3 at the half, 45-10 the final. Coach Stig talked on Monday about just have to keep his team's confidence up this week going into the game here at home against Missouri State.
Yeah, and another running quarterback, and we all know about that Missouri State game last year. It's the one that dropped SDSU to 4-4, and then they went on their big run toward the playoffs. But in that Missouri State game last year, they hit him with 4 plays of at least 60 yards, and Stig called it one of the top 3 weirdest games he's ever seen in his 17 years at SDSU.
Yeah, until this one at Illinois State.
Probably, exactly. So that quarterback from Missouri State is back. I know it's here at Coughlin Alumni Stadium, but they're going to have to learn to contain these running, dual option, read option threat quarterbacks. Otherwise, it could be another long afternoon.
All right, Kiera Harris is the guy's name from Missouri State. We'll have the game live here on Midco Sports Network at 6 o'clock on Saturday and more during the week here on SDSU-Tube as we get ready for that game.